Marcus Cole had been a slave for 3 years. And in that time he had learned one simple truth about the universe. Humans were nothing special to the galaxy at large. And the galaxy wanted to make sure they never forgot. I'd scrubbed the floors of the great palace on Essara Prime every single day. His knees aching against the cold stone. His hands raw from the chemical cleaners that the Velathari considered safe for lesser species. And his spirit slowly dying one humiliation at a time. The Velathari were beautiful in a terrifying way. With skin that looked like liquid silver and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. And they moved through their palace like gods walking among insects. Never looking down at the creatures that served them. Marcus had been an engineer back on Earth. A father, a husband, a man with dreams and plans and a future that seemed bright and full of promise. But that was before first contact went wrong. Humanity had sent their best ship to meet the Velathari delegation, hoping for friendship and trade and all the wonderful things that science fiction had promised would come with meeting alien life. But the Velathari had different ideas. They saw humans as primitives, as useful tools, as things to be collected and sold and put to work in the endless halls of their empire that spanned 40 star systems. Marcus remembered the day he was captured, the day he watched his wife die in the attack, the day his 6-year-old daughter Sarah was torn from his arms by soldiers who did not care about her screams or his begging. He never found out what happened to Sarah, and that not knowing was worse than any physical pain the Velathari could inflict upon him. So he scrubbed floors and carried waste and kept his eyes down and his mouth shut, because survival was all he had left. Even if he did not know why he bothered to survive at all, the palace was enormous beyond human understanding, with towers that touched the clouds and halls that could fit entire cities inside them. And Marcus had seen perhaps 1% of it in his 3 years of service. He slept in a small cell with other human prisoners, ate whatever scraps the kitchen staff threw their way, and dreamed of Earth every single night. The other humans told him to give up hope, to accept his place, to stop thinking about escape or rescue or anything beyond the next day of labor. Some of them had been there for 10 years or more. And they had become like ghosts, hollow and empty, and barely alive. Marcus refused to become like them, even though he did not know what he was holding on to or why it mattered. Everything changed on a morning that seemed like any other, when the head servant called his name and told him he was being reassigned to a new position in the royal nursery wing. The other slaves looked at him with something like pity, because working near the royal family meant more scrutiny, more danger, and more chances to make a fatal mistake. Marcus followed the guard through endless corridors of silver and crystal, past fountains that flowed with glowing liquid, past windows that looked out on alien skies filled with 3 moons and stars. He did not recognize the royal nursery wing was quieter than the rest of the palace, with soft lighting and gentle music playing from hidden speakers. And Marcus felt a strange sense of peace wash over him as he entered. A small figure sat in the corner of the main room, her silver skin slightly duller than the adults, her eyes larger and more curious. And she looked up at Marcus with an expression he had not seen on any Velathari face: genuine interest. This was Princess Vellani, sole heir to Queen Sivlith the Undying, ruler of the Velathari Empire for 2,000 years, and she was only 12 cycles old, which made her roughly equivalent to a human child of 8 or 9. "You are the new servant," she said, her voice high and musical. "You are human, yes, and I have read about your species in my studies, and I have so many questions." Marcus bowed low, not sure how to respond, not sure if responding was even allowed, not sure of anything except that this small alien child was looking at him like he was a person rather than a thing. "You may speak," she said. "I give you permission, and I want to know things, and nobody else will tell me anything interesting." Marcus raised his head slowly and met her eyes. And something in his chest that had been frozen for 3 years began to thaw just a little bit. "What would you like to know?" "Princess," he asked. His voice rough from disuse. She smiled. And it was such a strange expression on a Velathari face. So unlike the cold masks the adults wore, and Marcus realized that she was just a child. Lonely and curious and trapped in her own way. "Tell me about Earth," she said. "Tell me about the blue skies and the green plants and the animals that make sounds. And tell me why humans cry water from their eyes when they are sad. Because I do not understand that at all." Marcus sat down on the floor across from her. Forgetting protocol, forgetting his place. Forgetting everything except the eager face of a child who wanted to learn. He told her about oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. About forests filled with singing birds. About dogs that loved their owners with pure and simple devotion. About ice cream on hot summer days. About bedtime stories and birthday parties and all the small beautiful things that made human life worth living. Vellani listened with wide eyes and asked 100 questions. And Marcus answered every single one. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than despair. Days turned into weeks. And Marcus became the princess's unofficial teacher, companion, and friend. Even though those words were never spoken aloud, he was still a slave. Still property, still nothing in the eyes of the Empire. But within the walls of the nursery wing, he was something more. Vanley would run to him when he arrived each morning, eager to hear more stories about Earth, more explanations about human customs, more answers to her endless questions about emotions and families and love. "Why do humans protect their young so fiercely?" she asked one day. "My people believe that children must prove their own strength, that coddling creates weakness. But humans seem to believe the opposite." Marcus thought about Sarah, about the way he had tried to shield her with his own body, about the way his heart had shattered when she was taken from him. "Because children are not just the future," he said carefully. "They are hope-given form, and they deserve to be safe and loved while they are small, so that they can grow strong enough to face the universe on their own terms." Vellani was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. And then she said something that surprised him. "I think I would like to be protected like that," she whispered, "just once. I would like to know what it feels like to have someone care whether I live or die." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion he could not express. And he made a silent promise to himself and to this lonely alien child. If danger ever came for her, he would stand between her and harm. Not because she was a princess, not because it might earn him favor, but because she was a child who deserved to feel safe. He did not know that danger was already coming, moving through the shadows of the palace, planning death and chaos and the end of everything Vellani had ever known. But when it arrived, Marcus would be ready, because protecting the innocent was what humans did, even when it cost them everything. The Festival of Eternal Stars was the most important celebration in the Velathari Empire. A time when the entire palace came alive with light and music, and the promise of another 1,000 years of glorious rule. Marcus had been assigned extra duties for the occasion, cleaning and preparing and making sure everything was perfect for the arrival of dignitaries from across 40 star systems. He was exhausted by the time evening came, but he still made his way to the nursery wing to check on Vellani before the festivities began in earnest. The princess was supposed to be with her tutors, learning the proper ceremonies and rituals she would need to perform as the heir to the throne. But when Marcus arrived, he found her alone and crying. "They sent everyone away," she said, her voice small and frightened. "They said I needed to rest before the ceremony. But I do not want to be alone, Marcus. I feel scared, and I do not know why." Marcus knelt beside her and took her small silver hand in his rough, calloused one. And he smiled even though something in his gut was telling him that her fear was justified. "I will stay with you," he said. "At least until someone comes to take you to the ceremony. You should not have to be alone when you feel afraid. Villani nodded and held onto his hand tightly, and they sat together in the quiet of the nursery, while the sounds of celebration echoed from distant parts of the palace. Marcus did not know that at that very moment, 3 figures were moving through the walls themselves, using band-phase technology to slip past every security system the palace possessed. He did not know that the Obsidian Court, a rival faction that had grown tired of Queen Sivillith's endless reign, had decided that the fastest way to break the Queen was to destroy the thing she valued most. He did not know that Villani had been chosen to die tonight, and that the creatures sent to kill her were Karveshi, a species bred for one purpose and one purpose only: to end lives with perfect efficiency. The first sign of danger was a flicker in the lights, so brief that Marcus almost thought he imagined it. But his instincts from the raid that captured him screamed that something was very wrong. He stood up and pulled Villani behind him, his eyes scanning the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest with a fear he had not felt since the day he lost his daughter. "Marcus," Villani whispered, "what is happening? Why are you?" She never finished the sentence because the wall beside them rippled like water and 3 nightmares stepped through into the room. The deer Karveshi were everything horror stories warned about: tall and thin with too many joints, covered in black chitin that absorbed light, with compound eyes that glittered with cold intelligence and claws that dripped with neurotoxin. Marcus did not think, did not calculate, did not consider that he was a soft, fragile human facing 3 apex predators designed to kill things far more dangerous than him. He grabbed Villani and ran. The nursery wing was a maze of rooms and corridors, and Marcus sprinted through them with the princess in his arms, hearing the clicking sound of the Karveshi following close behind. "The alarms," Villani gasped. "Why are the alarms not working? Where are the guards?" "Someone should have." "Hold on," Marcus said, and he pushed through a door into the eastern corridor, a long hallway lined with decorative metalwork and windows that looked out on the celebration. Below he could see thousands of Velithari in the courtyard, laughing and dancing and completely unaware that their princess was running for her life just above their heads. The first assassin caught up to them halfway down the corridor, appearing from nowhere with speed that should have been impossible. And Marcus barely had time to throw Villani behind him before the claws came. 4 lines of fire ripped across his back, so deep he felt them scrape against bone, and the neurotoxin entered his bloodstream like liquid agony. He should have fallen, should have been paralyzed instantly, should have died within seconds like any other creature in the galaxy. But human biology processed the toxin differently, turning paralysis into pain, turning death into suffering. And Marcus stayed on his feet through sheer stubborn refusal to let this child die. He screamed and spun and grabbed the assassin by its throat, using strength he did not know he possessed, and he slammed its head against the wall with enough force to crack the stone. The Karveshi hissed in surprise, because prey was not supposed to fight back. Prey was supposed to fall and twitch and die, not grab predators and throw them like ragdolls. Marcus picked up a broken piece of decorative metal from the wall and drove it into the assassin's eye, twisting and pushing until the creature stopped moving. He was bleeding badly, and the toxin was making his muscles spasm and his vision blur. But he turned to face the other 2 assassins with the bloody metal still clutched in his hand. "Run," he told Villani. "Find guards, find anyone. Just run and do not look back." "I cannot leave you," she cried. "Marcus, please. You are hurt. You need..." "Run." The second assassin dropped from the ceiling where it had been waiting, and its claws caught Marcus across the arm, shattering bones and sending fresh waves of neurotoxin into his system. He headbutted the creature with all his strength, feeling his own skull crack against its mandible, feeling blood pour down his face, feeling pain beyond anything he had ever imagined. But the assassin staggered back, And that was all Marcus needed to swing his weapon in a wild arc that opened his throat. The third assassin circled him carefully, studying this impossible human who had killed two of its kind. Trying to understand how something so weak could cause so much damage, Marcus could barely see now, could barely stand, could barely remember his own name through the fog of pain and poison. But he could see Vellani still standing there, frozen in terror, unable to run, and he knew he had to keep fighting for her sake. "Come on then," he growled at the assassin, raising his broken arm and his bloody weapon. "Come on and try. I am not done yet. I am not done until she is safe." The Kaveshe lunged, and Marcus met it with everything he had left, with every ounce of human stubbornness and protective fury that his species had evolved over millions of years. They crashed together, in a tangle of limbs and claws and desperate violence. And Marcus took hit after hit, his ribs breaking, his flesh tearing, his blood painting the floor of the corridor. But he kept fighting, kept standing, kept putting himself between the monster and the child for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. That was how long it took for the royal guard to finally arrive, alerted by a servant who had heard screaming. And they found a scene that none of them would ever forget. The princess was pressed against the wall, untouched, staring at the human slave who had saved her life. Marcus was on his knees, still holding his weapon, still facing the direction of the threat, still ready to fight even though he had nothing left to give. He had 17 wounds across his body, a fractured skull, 3 broken ribs, a shattered arm, and enough neurotoxin in his blood to kill a Velathari 10 times over. He should have been dead 100 times over. But he was still breathing, still conscious, still protecting. "Safe," he whispered, looking at Vellani with eyes that were already closing. "You are safe now. That is all that matters." And then he collapsed, and the guards rushed forward. And somewhere in the distance, Queen Sivillith received word that her daughter had survived an assassination attempt. But what interested the queen far more than the attempt was the creature who had stopped it. The primitive human slave who had done something that no Velathari could explain. He had taken the hits meant for her daughter, and he had done it without hesitation, without calculation, without any hope of reward. The queen needed to understand why, and that need would change everything for Marcus, for Vellani, and for the entire galaxy. Marcus woke up in a room that no slave had ever seen, surrounded by technology that hummed with quiet power and medical equipment that looked like something from a dream. The ceiling above him was crystal clear, showing the alien stars of Nassara Prime, and the bed beneath him was softer than anything he had felt since leaving Earth. For a long moment, he thought he was dead, thought this was some kind of afterlife, thought that maybe the universe had finally decided to give him peace. Then the pain hit him all at once, a wave of agony that reminded him exactly how many pieces of his body had been broken and torn and poisoned. He gasped and tried to sit up, but his muscles would not respond properly, and he fell back against the pillows with a groan that echoed in the silent room. The physicians say you should not move for at least another week, a voice said from somewhere to his left. They say the damage to your body was extensive beyond their ability to fully comprehend. Marcus turned his head slowly and found himself looking at Queen Sivillith the Undying, ruler of 40 star systems, standing beside his bed like a ghost made of liquid silver. He had never been this close to her before. Had only seen her from great distances during ceremonies and processions. And up close, she was terrifying in a way that made his survival instincts scream, but he was too tired and too broken to feel proper fear. So he simply stared at her and waited for her to explain why she was here. "They say you should be dead," the queen continued, a voice like wind through crystal chimes. "They say no creature should have remained conscious through such trauma, that your species lacks the neural architecture for combat persistence, that you are impossible." Marcus tried to find words, tried to remember how to speak to royalty, tried to summon some kind of appropriate response, but all he could manage was, "She is just a kid." The queen tilted her head, studying him with those cold silver eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall over 2,000 years. "I do not understand," she said. "You are a slave, a prisoner, a creature with no stake in my daughter's survival. Yet you threw yourself against 3 Karveshi assassins and killed 2 of them with your bare hands. One was with a piece of metal," Marcus mumbled. And he was not sure why he felt the need to correct her. The queen did not smile, but something in her expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been curiosity or amusement or confusion. "You fought for 4 minutes and 37 seconds against creatures designed to kill things far more dangerous than humans. And you did not stop until you physically could not continue. And even then you remained conscious and ready to fight more." She stepped closer to his bed, close enough that he could see the patterns in her silver skin, the ancient intelligence in her ageless eyes. "I have ruled this empire for 2,000 years. And in that time, I have never seen anything like what you did. I have never witnessed such complete disregard for personal survival in service of another creature." Marcus closed his eyes because looking at her was making his head hurt worse than it already did. "You have children," he said quietly. "Or you have a child, Vallani. You should understand wanting to protect her." The queen was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was different somehow, less regal and more uncertain. "I value Vallani as my heir, as the continuation of my genetic legacy, as a political asset and a symbol of the empire's future. But I would not throw my own body between her and death." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Then I feel sorry for her," he said, "because every child deserves to know that someone would die for them." The queen straightened as if he had struck her, and for a moment Marcus was certain she was going to have him executed for his insolence, but instead she turned and walked to the window, staring out at the stars with her back to him. "I have ordered my scientists to study you," she said, "to analyze your blood and your brain and your body, to understand how you survived what should have killed you instantly." "And what did they find?" Marcus asked, not sure if he wanted to know the answer. "They found that human biology is remarkably adaptable, that your species evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill you, and that you developed psychological and physical mechanisms for surviving the unsurvivable." She turned back to face him, and there was something in her eyes that looked almost like respect. "They found that humans have a condition your species calls the fight or flight response, an automatic system that floods your body with chemicals when you perceive a threat to yourself or those you care about. Adrenaline," Marcus said. "We call it adrenaline." "Yes, but your response was not the standard version. Your response was something my scientists have never seen before. A complete override of every survival instinct in favor of protecting another creature." The queen moved back to his bedside, and she sat down in a chair that Marcus had not noticed before, lowering herself to his level in a way that felt almost intimate. "I watched the recordings of the attack hundreds of times," she admitted. "I studied every moment, every movement, every decision you made, and I cannot find logic in any of it." "There was no logic," Marcus said. "There was just a kid in danger and me in a position to help. That is all it was." "But why?" the queen demanded, and her voice cracked slightly on the word. "Why would you sacrifice yourself for a child that is not your species? Not your family, not your concern in any way." Marcus thought about Sarah, about the moment she was torn from his arms, about the helplessness he had felt when he could not protect her. "Because I could not save my own daughter," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "Because she was taken from me, and I do not know if she is alive or dead. And I could not live with myself if I let another child die when I had the power to stop it." The queen was silent, and Marcus saw something flicker across her face, Something that might have been understanding or sympathy, or perhaps just more confusion. I have interviewed every human prisoner in my empire, she said slowly. I have asked them all about this concept you call protective instinct. And they all told me the same thing. She leaned forward, her silver eyes burning into his. They said that humans would die for strangers, that they would throw themselves in front of danger for children they have never met, that they possess a love so powerful it overrides logic and self-preservation and everything else. Marcus nodded slowly because there was nothing else to say. They called it your greatest strength, the Queen continued. This capacity for sacrifice, this willingness to burn for others. And I did not understand how something so inefficient could be considered a strength. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. But I watched you fight those assassins, and I saw something I have never seen in 2,000 years of rule. I saw pure love in its most violent form, and it terrified me. Marcus did not know how to respond to that. So he stayed silent and let her continue. My species evolved past such emotions long ago. We learned that attachment was weakness, that caring was vulnerability, that the only path to power was cold calculation and ruthless self-interest. The Queen stood up and walked to the window again, her form silhouetted against the alien stars. I executed my own siblings to claim this throne. I watched my mother die and felt only satisfaction that my path was finally clear. I've never loved anything except power and legacy. She turned back to face him, and there was something raw in her expression, something almost wounded. But you, a slave with nothing, a prisoner with no hope, a creature I could crush without thought. You showed more strength in 4 minutes than I have shown in 2,000 years. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes because her words touched something deep inside him. Some need to be seen and understood that he thought had died long ago. It is not strength, he said quietly. It is just being human. The Queen stared at him for a long moment. And then she did something that Marcus would never forget for the rest of his life. She bowed her head to him, just slightly, just for a moment. A gesture of respect that no Velathari ruler had ever shown to any slave. I need to understand you, she said. I need to understand what you are and why you are. Because you have shown me that my species may have lost something precious in our pursuit of perfection. Marcus did not know what to say, so he simply nodded and closed his eyes, exhausted beyond words. But even as sleep claimed him, he could feel the Queen's gaze upon him, studying him, trying to solve the puzzle of a love so strong it could make the impossible happen. And somewhere in the palace, a young princess was asking every servant she could find about the human who had saved her life. Desperate to understand the same thing her mother was struggling with, what made humans so willing to burn for others? And could the Velathari ever learn to do the same? The weeks of healing were long and painful, but human bodies were stubborn things that refused to give up. And Marcus slowly grew stronger with each passing day. The physicians came and went, taking samples and running tests and muttering about statistical impossibilities. And Marcus let them do their work because he had nothing else to occupy his time. The Queen visited him every day without fail, sitting beside his bed and asking questions that ranged from simple curiosity to deep philosophical inquiry. She wanted to know about Earth, about human history, about the wars they had fought and the peace they had built, about the religions that promised meaning and the sciences that promised truth. But mostly she wanted to know about love, that strange human concept that seemed to drive everything Marcus did. Would you do it again? She asked one afternoon. Knowing the pain you would suffer, knowing how close you came to death, would you still throw yourself between those assassins and my daughter? Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes, without even thinking about it. The Queen shook her head slowly, struggling to comprehend something so alien to her nature. But why? She pressed. There must be some reason, some benefit you expect, some reward you are hoping to receive. Marcus smiled despite the pain in his healing face. The reward was seeing her run away. Knowing she had a chance to survive, that was enough. That was everything. Vellani came to visit him as often as she was allowed, slipping away from her tutors and guards to sit beside his bed and hold his hand. She cried the first time she saw him awake, silver tears streaming down her small face as she apologized over and over for not running when he told her to. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I could not move. I could not think. I just watched you fight, and I thought you were going to die because of me." Marcus squeezed her hand gently with his unbroken fingers. "I fought because of you," he corrected. "Not because of you. There is a difference. You did nothing wrong. You survived. And that is all that matters." Vellani looked at him with eyes that held a question she was afraid to ask. "Why do you care about me so much?" She finally said, "I am Velathari. Your people and mine are not friends. You have every reason to hate me and my kind." Marcus thought carefully before answering, wanting to give her the truth she deserved. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly. "Her name was Sarah, and she was taken from me when I was captured. I do not know what happened to her. I do not know if she's alive or dead." Vellani's eyes went wide with shock, because slaves were not supposed to have families. We're not supposed to have stories. We're not supposed to be real. "I could not protect Sarah," Marcus continued. I tried so hard. But they were too strong and too fast, and there was nothing I could do." He looked at Vellani with all the tenderness he had been saving for a daughter he might never see again. "When I look at you, I see a child who deserves to be safe, who deserves to grow up and become whoever she wants to be. And protecting you feels like honoring Sarah's memory." Vellani started crying again, and this time she crawled onto the bed beside him and buried her face in his shoulder, careful not to touch his many injuries. "I wish you were my father," she whispered. And the words broke something inside Marcus that he thought was already broken beyond repair. He held her as best he could with his one working arm. And they stayed like that for a long time, two broken souls finding comfort in each other. The queen found them there an hour later, and she stood in a doorway watching her daughter sleep in the arms of a human slave. And something shifted in her ancient heart. She did not speak, did not interrupt, just watched until Vellani stirred and realized she needed to return to her duties after the princess left. The queen sat in her usual chair and looked at Marcus with an expression he could not read. "I have made a decision," she said, "and I need to know your answer before I can proceed." Marcus waited, not sure what to expect. "I am prepared to offer you something that no slave has ever been offered in the history of my empire. Something that may seem impossible given your circumstances." She leaned forward, her silver eyes intense and focused. "I will grant you freedom, a ship, supplies, and the coordinates to human space. I will release every human prisoner in the Velathari Empire and allow them to return home." Marcus felt his heart stop, because this was everything he had dreamed about for 3 years. Everything he thought he would never have in exchange. The queen continued, "I ask only one thing." "What?" Marcus managed to say through the shock. "Stay here. Be my daughter's protector. Teach her what you are. Show her the things that make humans burn so bright." The offer hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt torn in a way he had never experienced before. He could go home, could see Earth again, could search for Sarah if she was still alive, could warn humanity about the Velathari and help prepare for whatever came next, or he could stay with a lonely alien child who called him guardian in her native tongue, who looked at him like he was the most important person in the universe, who needed someone to show her that love was not weakness. "Why me?" he asked. "You have guards and soldiers and warriors who are far more capable than I am. Why do you need a broken human slave?" The queen was quiet for a moment before answering. because none of them would die for her. She said simply, they would fight for her out of duty, they would protect her out of obligation. But not one of them would throw their body between her and death without hesitation. She reached out and touched his hand. The first time she had ever made physical contact with him. You have something my entire empire lacks. A capacity for sacrifice that cannot be trained or commanded or bought. And I want my daughter to learn from you. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about Sarah. About the little girl with her mother's smile who used to climb into his lap and ask for stories. He thought about the day she was taken. About the helplessness and rage and grief that had consumed him for 3 years. He thought about Vellani. About the way she looked at him with trust and wonder. About the way she had started to believe that maybe love was not just a human delusion. If I stay, he said slowly, I need something more than just my freedom. The queen nodded for him to continue. I need you to find my daughter. I need to know what happened to Sarah, whether she is alive or dead. I need closure. The queen considered this for a moment and then nodded. I will have my agents search every record, every auction, every colony. I will find her if she can be found, and if she cannot, I will tell you the truth of what happened. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face because he was about to make the hardest choice of his life. He could go home and spend years searching for Sarah on his own, hoping and praying and probably never finding answers, or he could stay and trust this ancient alien queen to use her vast resources to find his daughter while he protected someone else's. Charlie thought about what Sarah would want, what she would tell him if she could see him now, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that she would want him to stay, that she would want him to protect the girl who needed him, that she would be proud of her father for choosing love over escape. I will stay, he said. And the words felt like both a surrender and a victory. The queen smiled, actually smiled, and it transformed her face into something almost warm. Then let us discuss the terms of your new position, she said, because you are no longer a slave, Marcus Cole. You are the guardian of Princess Vellani, and that title carries more weight than you can possibly imagine. And so Marcus stayed, not as a prisoner, but as a protector, not as property, but as family. And the choice would change everything for humans and Velathori alike. But that night, alone in his healing bed, he whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Watch over Sarah wherever she is, and let her know that her father never stopped loving her, never stopped fighting, never stopped being the man she believed in. The stars outside his window offered no answer. But Marcus felt a strange peace settle over him anyway. He had made his choice, and he would see it through to the end, wherever that end might lead. 5 years passed like water through fingers, each day bringing new challenges and new victories and new reasons to keep fighting. Marcus watched Vellani grow from a lonely child into something the Velathari had never seen before. A princess who cared about more than power and legacy. She visited the lower castes of her society, learning the names of servants and workers who had never been acknowledged by royalty before. And she asked them about their lives and their dreams and their struggles. She argued with her mother about the treatment of prisoners and slaves. Passionate debates that echoed through the palace halls. And slowly she began to win those arguments, one small victory at a time. Marcus trained her in everything he knew: human history and philosophy, the art of seeing people as people rather than tools, the strength that came from protecting the weak instead of exploiting them. He taught her about democracy and freedom, about civil rights movements and peaceful revolutions, about all the times humans had fought not for conquest, but for justice. Vellani absorbed it all like a sponge. Her quick mind processing concepts that most Velathari would consider dangerous nonsense. And she began to see her empire with new eyes. We have built our greatness on suffering, she said one evening, looking out at the city below the palace. Every convenience we enjoy is made possible by creatures who have no choice in their service. Marcus stood beside her, his body marked by years of protecting her from those who still wanted her dead. "That is true," he said. "But recognizing the problem is the first step toward fixing it." "Will you help me fix it?" she asked. "When I am queen, will you stand beside me and help me change everything?" Marcus smiled and put his hand on her shoulder. "I will stand beside you for as long as I live." That was the promise I made, and I intend to keep it. The Obsidian Court made 2 more attempts on Villani's life during those 5 years, each one more desperate and deadly than the last. The first came during a diplomatic reception, when a servant-turned assassin lunged at the princess with a poisoned blade, and Marcus took the weapon in his chest while throwing her to safety. The second came during a tour of the Outer Territories, when a bomb was planted in her transport ship, and Marcus shielded her body with his own when the explosion tore through the hull. Each time he survived, though barely, and each time his body accumulated more scars, more damage, more evidence of a love that would not quit. The Velathari who watched him began to speak of him in whispers, calling him the undying human, the guardian who would not fall. The strange one who laughed at Death Queen Sivillith watched it all with growing fascination and something that might have been called affection if she had allowed herself to name it. She kept her promise and searched for Sarah. And 1 year after Marcus made his choice, she came to him with news that shattered his heart. Sarah had died in a labor camp 6 months after being captured, killed by a disease that her young human body could not fight. And she had been buried in an unmarked grave on a moon he had never heard of. Marcus wept for 3 days, locked in his quarters, grieving the daughter he had failed to save. But on the 4th day he emerged and returned to Villani's side, because he had made a promise and he would not break it. Not even for grief. Villani held his hand and cried with him, and she swore that when she became queen, she would ensure no child ever suffered as Sarah had suffered. The queen watched her daughter comfort the human who had become the most important person in her life. And something finally changed in her ancient heart. She began to understand what Marcus had been trying to teach her all along. That love was not weakness. That sacrifice was not foolishness. That the greatest strength came from caring about something more than yourself. On the day of Villani's ascension to crown princess, when she officially became the heir who would one day rule 40 star systems, Queen Sivillith addressed her empire with an announcement that shook the galaxy. "Humanity is hereby elevated to protected status," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner of her domain. "They are no longer to be considered a slave species, and any harm done to a human will be treated as a crime against the crown itself." The gathered dignitaries gasped in shock, because such a designation had not been granted to any species in 3,000 years. Furthermore, the queen continued, "I hereby create a new position in my court, one that has not existed since the founding of our empire." She turned and looked at Marcus, who stood beside Villani in a place of honor. "Marcus Cole, former prisoner of war, is hereby granted the title of Royal Bonded, making him a permanent member of my household with all the rights and protections that entails." Marcus felt the weight of 1,000,000 eyes upon him, felt the shock and confusion and anger radiating from beings who had considered him less than nothing. But he also felt Villani squeeze his hand, felt the queen's gaze warm upon him, felt for the first time in years that he truly belonged somewhere. After the ceremony, Sivillith found him alone on a balcony, staring up at the stars he had learned to call home. "You confuse me," she said, coming to stand beside him. "You infuriate me. You make me question everything my species believes about strength." She paused and turned to look at him directly. "I find I cannot imagine my empire without you in it." Marcus smiled that strange soft human expression she had grown to find comforting. "That is called friendship." "Your Majesty, we do it a lot where I am from." The queen laughed. Actually laughed, a sound that no one in her court had heard for 600 years. "You have corrupted my daughter with your human ideas," she said. But there was warmth in her voice. "She speaks of reform and compassion and treating all creatures with dignity. Is that so terrible?" Marcus asked. The queen considered the question seriously before answering. "I am 2,000 years old, and I have seen empires rise and fall, species flourish and die, stars born and extinguished. And in all that time, I never encountered anything that made me question my assumptions." She turned to face the city below, the millions of lives going about their business under her rule. "But you, in 5 short years, have made me wonder if perhaps we were wrong all along. If perhaps there is strength and kindness that we have been too blind to see." Marcus stood beside her in silence, letting her process thoughts that were clearly difficult for her. "I am not saying I have changed," she clarified. "I am still ruthless, still calculating, still willing to do terrible things to protect my empire." "I know," Marcus said. "I never asked you to be something you are not. But Vellani is different," the queen continued. "She has a chance to be something new, something better. And that is because of you." She turned and did something that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. She embraced him, awkwardly and briefly, but genuinely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving her life, for teaching her, for showing us all that there is another way." Marcus held her gently. This ancient and terrible queen who had become something like family. "Thank you for letting me stay," he replied, "for giving me a purpose when I had lost everything." They separated and stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the alien sky in colors that Earth had never known across the galaxy. On a small blue planet called Earth, humanity received a transmission from the Velathari Empire. Diplomatic channels were opening. The message said, and the Velathari were specifically requesting more humans, more teachers, more guardians who could show them what they had lost in their pursuit of perfection. Earth's leaders did not know whether to be terrified or proud. But the veterans who had fought the Velathari and lost just smiled. They had always known that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or strength or numbers. It was the capacity to love so fiercely that it could change even the coldest hearts. Marcus never returned to Earth, choosing instead to spend his remaining years at Vellani's side, watching her grow into the queen who would transform an empire. And when he finally died, old and tired but at peace, the entire Velathari nation mourned him as one of their own. They built a statue of him in the palace gardens, a human standing with his arms spread wide, protecting a child carved from pure silver. The inscription at the base was simple, but said everything that needed to be said. He took the hits for her, and in doing so, he taught us all what it means to truly love. And for generations afterward, young Velathari would ask their parents about the strange human in the statue, and the parents would tell them the story of Marcus Cole, the guardian who would not fall, the man who changed an empire with nothing but the strength of his heart. Humanity, it seemed, had made an impression that would never fade.